Everybody, I am Sarge, and we are so honored to be working on this little get together. It's a long time coming, but we're finally here for Amudim. And for those of you who are not part of Amudim, many of you are, but some of you aren't. Amudim Unite to Heal provides services to help mitigate some of the difficulties and some of the circumstances which make many different difficulties in life easier to handle. Mental health, food, people are food challenged, people are living challenged. And we are here tonight on this little get together to talk about addiction, which has a myriad of directions that we can go. But my name is Sarge, and tonight Tom Arnold and I are going to chit chat and talk about our own personal journeys and what we have been through and the solutions and the remedies, the stigmas, some of the things that we have done to achieve a level of sobriety and to stay clean. Also, the aspect of it that is so prevalent in Amudim, which is uniting to heal. There is no Sarge, and I can speak for Tom, I think, when I say there is no sober Tom Arnold, unless we unite with other people who have traveled the same roads that we have and have been on the same journey that we've been on. And so consequently, here we are. And I want to welcome Tom Arnold on the conversation also. How you doing, Tom?
Good, man. It's an honor to be here. Number one, I'm with a fellow alcoholic. And so anytime there's two of us together, that's a meeting, and I can always use it. I'm honored to be involved with this program because of the kindness aspects of it and the compassion. And you know, this disease, addiction, affects every community. And I think that's important. But I think that the thing that saves me every day is being a part of the addiction community, a part of the recovery community. And part of that is being of service like we are today. It's a very selfish thing for me being of service because it benefits me the most. And, you know, maybe I'll share a little bit about my journey, Sarge, and then you could share your journey if you don't mind.
Well, just to frame it, inherent to the Jewish community,
Yes.
There was a psychiatrist from Pittsburgh named Abraham Tversky, and he was one of the original addictionologists and original psychiatrists who was also a rabbi. And he brought a lot of secular crossover into the religious aspect of his own personal life. He blended his recovery life with his religious life. And if you heard Tversky speak, and Tversky was very big with Amudim and with the Jewish charities, but as it turns out, he was able to find a way that it not be so religious, but that it be recovery. And when it comes to God, when it comes to a higher power, when it comes to whatever you call your higher power, or however that came to be for you, it was interesting how this Rabbi Tversky, who I was fortunate enough to get to meet in Miami at an event a number of years ago, and we both spoke on the same panel. It was absolutely life-changing because he explained the importance of the higher power in the journey, whether we were aware of it or not, the higher power being there all along. So I just wanted to make that statement because that's the group that we're speaking to tonight. And I would love to hear about how you began your journey, really where your sobriety began, and where the light came on for you, you know, in that way.
Well, let me just say this about God. Some people get bugged about it. I believe, obviously, I didn't create all this. I look at my kids, I'm like, oh yeah, I did everything. I did look outside, I did everything. I think it's important. I always tell guys, they're like, yeah, I don't want to be religious. It's a spiritual program. It doesn't matter what your religion is or whatever. You just have to believe that something greater than you out there. It could be that doorknob. You can start with that. But there's something greater, and it certainly has made things easier for me. That I'm not responsible for everything. That I'm not the guy. You know, there's something greater out there, and certainly I've seen the evidence of it. That's just the way I look at it. Um, I'm from a small town in Iowa. There were four Jewish families, and and we used to say, yeah, not enough to hate. But there was it was a small community, and my grandparents on my mother's side worked in the meatpacking plant. In fact, it was a pork processing plant, believe it or not. But it was a small, tight knit community. They had the high holy days where in Artie Siegel's Western wear, and they'd have a rabbi come down from Des Moines, and they go back of Artie Siegel's, and he was a character. But when I came to LA, I had a stepson that was time to get bar mitzvahed, and so I studied with him for a year at the University Synagogue down here because I didn't know enough, and what the rabbi told me was at the end of it, well, what do you think Judaism is, and how do you define it? I said, I don't know. What goes around comes around. He said, that's it. What goes around comes around. And so, being a part of an organization like this, or doing this with you, Sarge, is such a blessing for me, and I will live another day because of it. I grew up where everybody drank. Everybody. It was a hard, it was a hard town. It's a meat packing plant town, And so from an early age, I started drinking. I suppose 12 or 13, um, and I started getting arrested. Because that's what happens. You get in fights with police, you act like a fool, you get arrested. And I kept thinking, and I remember being in the back of a squad car, thinking, there's something better for me out there if I could just get a handle on this stuff. There is something better, and I think I'm going to blow it. But I always believed in something greater out there. And in my case, it turned out to be, I had dreams to be an actor, which is crazy if you're from that small town. I had dreams of, I remember working at the meatpacking plant, which I worked on the kill floor of the meatpacking plant for 3 years after high school to save money for college because I knew, oh, if I get to that college, then I'm going to have a chance because people are different there. There's all kinds of different people at the University of Iowa. In my hometown of Tumwa, everybody looked the same. Everybody did the same. But I said, if I could get out of here, do that. And I used to daydream. I don't know if you've ever worked at a meatpacking plant, but you're chiseling heads or you're doing bone and hams or whatever you do, and you daydream. And I remember I had a daydream that I was best friends with Robin Williams. And first, let me say, Robin Williams, who is one of us, everything good you've ever heard about Robin Williams is true, and then some. And if I called him at 3 a.m. and said, so and so's in trouble, whether he knew him or not, he'd be like, Tom, let's go get him.
And when you say one of us, Tom, and when you say one of us, I know what you mean, but explain to the people what that means. He was one of us.
Robin was a recovering alcoholic, and he worked very hard. In Robin's case, he was dealing with three things, and he had a mental illness, he had a brain disease, he had Parkinson's, so maybe more than three. I would daydream I was best friends with Robin Williams, and I'd get home from the meatpacking plant, and I'd be looking in the mirror like, I'm crazy. I have to quit having dreams because it's so disappointing that they're not going to come true. And 10 years later, I'm sitting at Robin Williams' house because we're doing a movie, 9 months, and we have the night before we started working on the movie, he had a dinner, and then at the end of it, I'm sitting there with Robin, and I said, I've been here before. And he's like, in my house? I go, no, here, me, you, best friends. And he said, we're not best friends. I go, I know, but it's close enough to my dream. So with Robin, like a lot of us, you don't know, you can't get a handle on your mental illness or whatever that other thing is until you get clean and sober. And a lot of people have dual addictions. I had to get clean and sober before I dealt with things that happened in my childhood. There was the pedophile in my neighborhood, something I just blocked out. And then when I got sober, I went, oh yeah. And I ended up tracking the guy down. And, he's a big religious leader. He has big business, of course, big super Christian guy, and I found him. And I went to his place of business and confronted him and I didn't beat him up, or I didn't want to get in more trouble, but I confronted him. And it felt like a big I came out of there and I felt like a ton of bricks had been taken off my chest. And I went right over to the Iowa Capitol building to the governor's office, said, you got to do something about this guy because the police say the statute of limitations is up and you got to stop. He's about to adopt his fourth son. And he said, the governor at the time, Terry Branstad, said, oh my God, that'd be a federal offense. You're asking me to commit a federal offense. I'm not even going to pretend you weren't here. Get out of here. And then about 4 days later, my brother called, who'd found him. My brothers are really good about finding people, and said his adoption fell through, the guy's adoption. Paperwork snafu, whatever. And that's God right there. But then I thought, have I done enough? I confronted the guy, I did this. And so I put up posters, kid high, 6 blocks around his house, and had my brothers redo them every few days, saying his name, his face, his crimes. And I just felt like I had to let the other kids know. And that's one of the gifts of sobriety, is that happens. And then my sister, of course, who was a gangster, and there's a documentary series about her called The Queen of Meth. She was the biggest drug dealer in America. She got busted, of course, that's what happens. And during her trial, I went back to Iowa to support her. That's what you do with your family. And a person came up to me and said, I know about the guy that raped you because he did the same thing to his own brother, who I'm married to. And then 30 other kids came forward, adults now, but they saw that and they said, oh yeah, I'm from that neighborhood. This is what happened. There was so much shame attached to that. And I think with boys, you're always going, I definitely got to keep that a secret, because that seems, but because I got sober, I could do it the right way too. I practiced what I was going to say to the guy and handle it the right way, and did it, as many legal things as I could, and got the word out. And that's just something that would have never happened if I hadn't got sober. It made it easier to stay sober because I didn't have that cloud right here.
Tell us though about, I'm interested in knowing the linchpin point, the point at which your addiction was something that you had to do something about, and you began to do something about it, and then the lights came on regarding the solution. Because these are all repressed trauma, horrible things that happened to you, horrible things that happened in your family. You personally, your recovery journey, when did you get sober the last time? And that was it, when you just,
my mother was just a terrible alcoholic. She left our family when I was 4. She left me with that babysitter. So, I knew what alcoholism looked like. She was married 7 times in our small town. She made my sister get married when she was 14 to a 22-year-old pedophile. I mean, that's how you end up in the drug business, I think. I got arrested a bunch of times too for drunk driving, fighting with the police, doing these things. I kept, in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, I've got to get it together. And in 1986, I went to my first 12-step meeting, and I liked, there were some people that I'd known there, and it was the first time I tried to be sober. I didn't go enough, and I stayed sober for 6 months, and then
was this in Iowa? Was this in near Des Moines?
I moved to Minneapolis by then. In 1989, though, after I moved to Los Angeles to write the Roseanne Show in 1988. I got out here and I met a dealer like my first day, and he was a big dealer, and he said, I could sell you in quantity, it's cheaper. And I was like, oh yeah, that's what I got to do, because I have a job and it's a good writing job. Oh, I'll buy quantity. I'll buy more than I need so that I won't do it. And I don't think I ever went to bed without doing everything, drinking every drink, doing, and so I escalated once I got out here. And I ended up in the hospital once, and then in 1989, it was a big public thing, and I was driving home to my fiance Roseanne in our house, and I went to the gate.
Did you ever have this kind of money in your pocket either? I mean, it was the
no, but no, I hadn't. But there There's never enough money for this. People always say, only if I had this much money, then I could do what I wanted and I wouldn't want to do it. And this disease is a killer. This disease is waiting for you to think that. So we lived up there at Benedict Canyon, and I went to our gate and I couldn't remember the code, and it was my birthday. That was the code. I had to go up on Mulholland and call Roseanne and say, can you come down the gate and let me in? I knew she'd be so mad. And so I parked the car there, and she pulls her car up, gets out of the car, comes towards me. I thought, well, she's going to hit me, or, I deserve that, or whatever. But she just hugged me and said, I just want you to come home. And that moment, that was a moment of clarity from God, right? That's not what's supposed to happen. And it really stuck with me. It's still stuck with me. And I went back, and then I got a cab, and I went to rehab. And, I learned things in that first rehab. My sobriety has been a process. I haven't drank since the 80s, but at 19 years sober, I wrecked my motorcycle on PCH. And I'd always said to people, hey, I'm not an opioid guy. I was a booze and cocaine or whatever. I don't get it, what you guys, the opioids. But at 19 years sober, I was laying on PCH, and the ambulance came, and he said, are you in pain? And I said, yeah. And he said, I'm going to fix that, and gave me a shot of fentanyl. And I was like, oh no, that's what I've needed my whole life. So I took a 20-year cake, knowing I was still on the pain medication from the summer before, which is inappropriate. Then I started over. I started my sobriety over, and with the new lessons I learned. And I never stopped going to 12-step meetings. I never stopped being of service. I never stopped being around people. That's what saved my life, is along this process, when I've had a bump in the road, I've got a great group of people like yourself, Sarge, that live a good life, and I can, just being around them has been very helpful. But let me say,
how did I miss you? How did I miss you?
Yeah.
I lived in Los Angeles for 11 years. I went to the log cabin 5 days a week. I went to the Virgin America meeting in the basement of the Virgin store on Sunset across from the Laugh Factory every Saturday. I went after that meeting, I would go over to Roxbury for the CA meeting and sit with Shadow at that meeting. I don't know how I missed you ever, because I was everywhere conceivably, because I just love sober friends so much and love being around the Unite to Heal thing. I don't feel as comfortable around just regular people. I don't feel like socially, personally, emotionally, I don't feel like I can totally be myself unless I'm around other people like you. Like you and I, we've never really broken bread. We've never spent a lot of time together, yet we could get together like this. And I know you're telling the truth every step of the way. It's totally legit, totally valid. How did we miss each other in this journey? I don't know how that happened, but
yeah. Well, the thing is, you and I, we sit there, we go, oh, he knows me. I know him. I know, and a lot of times you get together with people in recovery, and the stories you tell are horrible to other people. They're frightening. I was thinking I was going to do this, and they start laughing. That's crazy, but it's helpful. I have to say too, 5.5 years ago, a little bit, 5.5 years ago, I became my own doctor, and I started taking benzos. And benzos are, be careful with benzos, like Xanax and things like that. And it became a problem. So I went back 5.5 years ago to another rehab and worked on that. And because at the time my kids were 4 and 1, and I just knew I can't be a good father and have any kind of issues like this. So my relapse has been a part of my journey, and I tell people not to give up, obviously, and don't let people shame you. We have a disease. The best thing you could do is get around other people that have that disease, and there's organizations like this, and it shines a light on this stuff, because if there's so much shame involved, and this, Sarge, I know this from when I was using the secret and the lies and the shame, and I don't have to do that anymore. That's a big relief, to not have to get my story straight. It's a great relief.
No, that's amazing. to give you a little thumbnail, because you have no idea. When I got sober, it was because I had been homeless for about 9 months in New York City. Now, I grew up in Long Island in a very wealthy suburb called Great Neck. I moved to Manhattan. I went to Juilliard. I was a child prodigy. I was marked for greatness. I ended up in New York City, in Manhattan, and after a number of career changes, which we're not going to get into because we only have one evening, I ended up homeless on the streets of New York behind 3 different kinds of addictions. I was on angel dust, I was on crack, I was on ketamine, and I was drinking, and I was stealing for my habit. And people ask me, well, when did you know things were going to be different? I didn't know things were going to be different, but what happened was I still had a lot of friends left over, because I'd been a modeling agent, a booking agent in the modeling business. I had worked in the television production. I worked for CBS Sports on 6th Avenue at Black Rock. I had a bunch of amazing jobs. I had no problem getting hired. I just couldn't stay anywhere. Like, I would get hired places because of my personality and because of my engagement, and then people would say, we can't keep you here. You can't, you can't stay because there's something wrong with you and we're not sure what it is. It could have been the angel dust I was smoking in the bathroom, the PCP. To make a long story short, when I finally, the bottom dropped out of my life and I ended up on the streets, I had one friend left who I asked if I could use his apartment because he didn't know I was homeless. And he went to Aspen to go skiing, and he said, I'll leave the keys with the doorman. And he left the keys, and I went and I used the apartment. And shortly after that, I had to get high because I had a $300 a day crack habit. So I took all the things I could find in the drawers, jewelry, a couple of very expensive Van Cleef & Arpels watches, cufflinks, a necklace, a gold brooch, some diamond stud earrings that he had from his grandmother. I took them all. I went down to 47th Street to the Hasidic jewelry exchange down there. I traded it in for about $3,000. I went and did a major blowout, which lasted me about 3 days. When he came home, he couldn't find his stuff. He didn't know what to make of it. We ran into each other on the street, believe it or not. We ran into each other on the street. I was homeless, but I ran into this guy, and he said to me, where's my stuff? And I said, I sold it for drugs. And I was very heavy. I was about 360 pounds at the time. I was the fattest crack addict in New York. And so he said, what kind of drugs are you using? I said, crack. He says, it must be some very high calorie crack. He says, you're quite heavy. I said, well, I know. I said, I can't explain it. So he said, well, let's get you some help then. And instead of pressing charges, instead of calling the cops, he went to an intervention counselor. And 24 hours later, I was on a flight and I was headed to a place called Delray Beach, Florida. So this was 9 years of drinking and drugging. And now I show up on the steps of a treatment center at 10:15 in the evening. No detox. There was, back in those days, to give you a time frame, this was the day after Christmas, 1990. So should I just so happen to stay sober another month or so, that will be my 33rd sober Christmas. But not bragging, just saying, I walk in and this gentleman meets me at the door. And he says, wow, he says, you really stink. He says, are you an alcoholic? And I said, no, I'm a crack addict. I do all kinds of other drugs. I do PCP, ketamine, all these other things. He says, well, you're not an alcoholic. I said, no, I'm a drug addict. I just drink when I can't get drugs. And he says, okay, right. He says, how many drinks did you have on the plane? And I said, well, I had I had 11. I had 11 drinks on the plane. And he said, well, it's a good thing you're not an alcoholic. I said, why is that? He said, because an alcoholic would have had 12 drinks. He says, so you're 1 drink shy of alcoholism. He says, let's get to work on the crack. And he took me into the place, and he went through my luggage, which was a trash bag, not from a kitchen, but a bathroom trash bag, like a small little sack. And he said, why don't you go in the other room and ask God to remove the obsession to drink and drug from your life? And I said, who? And he said, God. I said, God. Now, I've been bar mitzvahed. I've been to shul as a kid. We went every Sabbath. We celebrated the holidays. But you know what? I never really had anything to do with God. I never prayed, really. I mean, I may have prayed the foxhole prayers when you when you were hoping you weren't going to get suspended from school, or when a girl was going to break up with you, or when you were going to get fired, or whatever. I'd never really connected. And he said, please go in the other room and hit your knees and ask for the obsession to be removed. So I went in the other room and I did it. I sat in a chair and sitting up, I hit my knees with my hands. I was tapping my knees and I came out, and the gentleman said to me, did you do it? And I said, yes, I did. And he says, well, then come on, let's go get you checked in. We'll put you in your room. And so that's what they did. And I did that thing, and he took me to the room, and I woke up the next day, and for some reason, the spell had been broken. And you know this is true. I mean, a lot of people don't believe you, but I'm a one and done guy. I didn't have the desire to. There were no fences. There were no electric fences. There were no barbed wire. There were no locks on the doors. I was in Florida, where you can go this way or that way and get whatever you need. If you wait at the beach, a bale of cocaine will eventually wash up at your feet in Florida. So I had no desire, and the spell had been broken. I stayed there for 42 days. Incidentally, there are no coincidences. That gentleman who met me at the door at 10:15 at night, the day after Christmas 1990, is my sponsor to this day. He was the clinical director of this particular little mom and pop treatment center, but he's my guy, Mike. He's still my guy. And so there I am, 42 days. I lived in a halfway house. After being from big, bad, fantastic, unbelievable New York and all of this Ivy League education that I was exposed to, I'm a guy bringing the carts off the lot at Home Depot in 104-degree heat in South Florida, because I was told the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And so there I was. I got myself a sponsor, and then I was encouraged by my sponsor to meditate. And he said to me, why don't you go on the beach and go get honest with yourself and think about what you would attempt to do with your life if you couldn't fail? I said, who am I going to talk to? He goes, well, talk to God. And once again, this God thing came up, and I was like, okay, I'll talk to God. And I went along with it. Well, anyhow, I went to the beach, and I closed my eyes, and I made an attempt to do the 11th step, which in our fellowship of recovery is to improve my conscious contact with my higher power, asking only for his knowledge of his will for me and the power to carry that out. And so through prayer and meditation. And so I went and I do little prayers and I meditated. I sat quietly, and I got a vision in my mind of a time when I was 6, when my grandfather took me in a place called Grossinger's, which was the Catskill Mountains. And he took me to see Don Rickles opening for Sammy Davis Jr. in this gigantic showroom. And I was 6. And I was under the table with a tablecloth over me, and my grandfather moved the tablecloth to the side. And I remember watching Rickles working that room, sweating bullets, sweating Israeli bullets. I looked behind the table and I saw 2,000 people in shambles. And I remember at 6 thinking, I don't know what this guy's talking about, but I want to do that.
Yeah.
And so when I went to my next group meeting, I said to him, I know what I want to do. I want to be a comedian. Now, this all happened under the auspices of God. Cut to New York. I'm on my journey now. I'm someone who prays and meditates every single day. I'm someone who can't drink before I go on stage or smoke a joint in order to take away. And in Amudim circles, they would call it shpilkus. Shpilkus is, do you know shpilkus? Shpilkus is not butterflies in your stomach. It's pterodactyls.
Yeah.
I don't have that luxury. And I'm in New York doing open mics. And I pray in the bathroom, and then I go on fearlessly with all of my character defects sequestered and quarantined for the moment. I'm going on stage to be a comedian. And I go up at this club on the Upper West Side called Stand Up New York. And I come off stage after this one particularly decent set, and a gentleman grabs me by the elbow and he says, you're the reason I come here. I said, really? And I said, are you hitting on me? Or he goes, no. I was a comedian. He says, I live in the neighborhood. I pop in. I'm always glad to see you're going to be performing. And I'm nobody at this point. I'm still nobody, but I'm even more nobody then. So now he says, come on, let's go grab a slice. So I said, I can eat. And he says, yeah, you look like you can eat. And so now we go out of the place and we go to the corner, and every corner had a pizza place, a Korean market, and a Starbucks. I don't know what it's like now in New York, but that's what it was. And so we go to the corner. It was Ray's Pizza, original, famous, authentic, genuine Ray's. So we go in, and the guy says, you want a beer? And I said, I learned this from my gurus in Florida from sobriety. I said, I don't drink. And he says, you don't drink. Why do you emphasize don't? And I says, because shouldn't means things go crazy when I do. Can't means I still want to. Don't means I don't. And and so I take you to just a snippet of neurolinguistic programming. Not only do we have to change our friends and our places and our people, we have to change our words because we hear ourselves. And when we're full of it, and when we're not speaking the right words, we actually are wrongly programming the hard drive. And so my guys knew this. I don't know how they knew it, but I learned don't. I don't misrepresent myself. I don't take things that don't belong to me anymore. I don't embellish, embroider, or try to impress people. I don't drink. These are the things I don't do. And he said to me, wow, you don't drink. He says, why don't you drink? I said, because I'm an alcoholic. He says, doesn't that mean you do drink? I said, no, it means I used to drink. Now I don't. He says, so you're one of those AAA people. You go to those meetings. I said, yes, I go to AAA. I ride around with a jumper cables and a gallon of gas in the car in case someone. No, I go to AA. I go to AA. I go to the AA meetings. Where? I got Perry Street. I go to Perry Street. I go to the 79th Street workshop. I go over here. I go over there. He says, wow. He said, that's amazing. How'd you get sober? And I told him the story I just told you, Tom. I said, well, I went to this place. The guy told me to hit my knees. I woke up the next day. I never drank or drugged again. He said to me, and who did this for you? I said, God. And he says, and you believe that? And I said, well, yeah, that's the story I've been going with for the last 4.5 years. He says to me, well, he says, do you suppose you would have prayed if that gentleman didn't invite you to when you arrived at that place? And I said, no, I would probably not have prayed had he not invited me to. He says, had you prayed a lot before you got to that? But I said, no, I hadn't. He said, so let me ask you something. Do you suppose it might have been something about being invited to or directed to that could have been just as important as the prayer itself? Because had you not been ready to take the direction, had you not been ready to take the invitation and do what you were told, there would have been no prayer. There would have been no transition. There would have been no conscious contact. There may not have been any waking up the next day without that desire to do that. And I thought to myself, wow, so you mean the taking of the direction was as important as the prayer itself? He said, maybe even more so. And it kind of twisted my head. And then we began to have our pizza, and he gave me his card at the end, and he told me if I ever want to come to the light show, the laser light show at the planetarium, I was more than welcome to. And I put the card in my pocket. I didn't think anything of it. And then a couple of months later, I was on the road. I think I was in Slidell, Louisiana, and I'm in some hotel drinking a Diet Coke and eating a Snickers bar after a show. And I emptied out my pants, and the card that fell out of these pants that I'd been wearing, and it fell on the floor, and I put it on the desk, and then I laid down to watch some TV, and I'm flipping around the channels, and all of a sudden, there's the guy. He's got on Nat Geo, he's got a show. He's talking about the universe, and he's talking about, it was Neil deGrasse Tyson.
That's good. I like him.
And he's not a God guy.
Yeah.
So my sober friends are God guys. And so I learned one of the biggest pieces of spiritual inspiration from somebody that's not even a God guy, that I need to be someone who is willing to take direction from people who know how to do this, because otherwise I have no shot, Tom, on an ongoing basis at either staying clean or becoming the kind of person that doesn't resort to letting his addictions become the better part of him again. And so I know right now in your life, you're engaged in a struggle and in a difficult time that you're working through right now. And it's entirely on the side of family. It's entirely on the side of love. Yeah. And strength and courage, what you're about and what you're doing. And I know you're doing that, and you couldn't do this if you were still battling yourself.
You're right. You're right. And I thank God every day that I am. And 5.5 years ago, when I was taking the Xanax, I had a feeling, something in my head said, it's going to be, this is it. It's over. This is what's going to happen. It's going to take, you have to go back a day at a time, get your sobriety back. But this is it. Something changed in my brain, because I'm still holding on to that. I'm very grateful. You talk about When I first got sober the first time, I did not like the guy in the mirror at all. So you're supposed to love yourself. And I did not, I hated myself. But I did a trick that a guy said, "Do you have any pictures of yourself when you were 4?" And I said, "I'll find one." He said, "Carry that. And when you feel like that, pull that out. And you feel like maybe you're not worth it, pull that picture out and look at yourself when you were 4 and say, that kid's worth it. I'm going to be here for that kid. That kid deserves to be protected. That kid, he deserves." And so was very helpful to me because that kid's also part of me, obviously. And so, but I still use it. I'll see that picture, I'll go, that kid, man, nobody was looking out for him. I'm going to do that. And then when you have your own children, which, 9.5 years ago, my son was born, 6.5, my daughter, that is such a game changer because the moment they're born, you always say, "Oh, I want to have unconditional love," and you get married like I have, and you both say you love each other conditionally, but that's just not true. There's conditions, as there should be. But the moment my son was born, I looked at him and I just felt there is so much unconditional love both ways. I mean, he's going to love me whether I'm a terrible dad or a great dad. So I'm going to be a great dad. And now I can't complain that I've never been unconditionally loved. I got 4 ex-wives, and I used to be able to say, "Well, I've never really been unconditionally loved," but I can't say that anymore because I am and I have, and as you said, the issues I'm dealing with are things that involve the kids, which are the most. I've really had to work on remind myself, be sober, number one, because anytime you do a battle, as it were, you want to be your best. And the worst thing I could do is, even because people are rooting against me, and I'm sure that you've been in a position where they're just counting on me to screw up. But I'm here for my kids, and I'm strong, and it's not always easy. I'm not tempted to use. I could get there. Something could come to my head like, I don't want to feel any of this. Maybe I'll be sneaky. Maybe I'll do this thing. But knock on wood, it has been different. And I tell people, they say, "Do you want to drink?" I say, I have an allergy to alcohol. I mean, that's what I did a long time. And people are like, "Oh, I get that. You have an allergy to alcohol." But we really do, because physiologically, at least for me, I was born with this. I see it in my mother. I see it.
I thought you were going to go to the old joke that when someone says, "Would you like a drink?" and you say, "No, I'm allergic." Every time I drink, I break out in handcuffs.
Yeah, that. Well, that was, yeah. But whatever it takes to, and I don't know about you, but at the end of my drinking, my drugs, I was isolating. It was just me. Once I moved to LA, excuse me, in '88 to write that show, I remember Roseanne came up to me, and we were buddies, or we'd started dating or something, and she and I used to get together in the Midwest and go do stand-up comedy on the road and get trashed, the two of us. But then when I moved to LA, I remember one day I was in the writer's room, she said, "Oh, do you do this every day? I thought you only partied when you were with me on the road." I go, "No, I do it every day." She goes, "That's bad." I go, "Is it?"
Wow.
And then immediately I knew I've got to hide it from her. I didn't go, "Oh, I got to get my stuff together." I went, "Okay, I can never be honest with her again about this thing." And so, I'm
Well, what's interesting about that, that you're talking about shame, and I can relate to that because shame was all that was my game. My whole game was shame. I didn't use with other people. When I hear people talking about, "Oh, I drink with these people, I party with those people, I smoke with those people," I didn't party with anybody. It wasn't a party when I used. I didn't, first of all, I don't like to share alcohol or drugs with people. Okay. I like to have everything that I've been able to acquire just for me. There are no other squirrels in this tree. This is my tree. I'm alone. I need to be alone because I'm ashamed of how gigantic my problem is. And an interesting caveat and an interesting piece of business was when I was taught the phrase, "I don't tell God how big my problems are. I tell my problems how big my God is." And I was taught to understand that the thing that I pray to, whoever you are and wherever you are, and in this context, in Amudim, they call him Hashem, Um, I tell my problems how big my higher power is, and then by comparison, it shrinks. It helps me to, my contact, my conscious contact, the fact that I set aside time to pray and meditate about gratitude. It has changed me. They can change my liver, they can change my kidneys, they can change a lung, perhaps, maybe give me, I have knees, I had knee replacements, they can give me a new shoulder. But my brain, they can't change, they can't swap out your brain. They can give you a new heart. They still can't do anything about your brain. The only thing I can do is do the inside journey. I'm the only one that can give myself a transplant for my brain. And I've heard throughout your story, it's so amazing because you got sober and then you had a bunch of issues that you had to deal with: repressed childhood trauma, anxiety. I know there was a time when you couldn't keep you in a chair. I mean, you were like literally bouncing around like a ping pong ball. It's amazing that you have matured and grown up and gotten to a place where you've been clean and sober so many times and for so long now. 99% of the time you've been aware that this needed to be addressed. You've done this. Yeah. And it's a preponderance of the actions that you've taken. And it doesn't matter whether we've done it continuously one time and done like I did, or tripping and falling, tripping and falling and tripping and falling and recommitting and recommitting and recommitting as you've done. It doesn't make any difference. There's still a stigma in the Jewish community around a lot of these young people who, when they get high or drunk and they have an alcohol or drug problem, they're ostracized from the community. That's and right. I do no, they just, there's certain sects of Judaism which forgive and allow you back in, but there are certain sects that turn away from you as broken. You're broken. We're done with you. You're out. I sponsor a guy who's, one of those kids who's been turned out by his very religious family. So I want to make a statement here in this forum to say that addiction, and I think you'll co-sign this with me, addiction is a gift, because if not for this gift that I've been given of my addiction, I would not have worked as hard as I have to become a better person in any way, shape, or form. My addiction is a gift because in triumph over it, I've gotten closer to God. I've become the kind of person that I'm proud to be, and I'm still working on it. And so it's a God-given gift. Just like my eye color, my height, the size of my feet, my alcoholism and my drug addiction are not something that I asked for. They're something that was preloaded into my DNA, and only something so coded into my DNA would require this much work to overcome. And so consequently, that's why once we're an alcoholic for life, we know we have to pray and meditate and be spiritual up to our eyebrows, immersed in a preponderance of spiritual actions so that we can become who we're supposed to be as opposed to who we became.
Yeah. Well, we're very lucky, I think when the first time someone said, you got to hit your knees and pray to God, just the idea of hit my knee, I was like, I'm going to do it the easy way. I'm just going to stand. No, you've got to humble yourself. I know you do. You and I have big egos. We have to do what we do for a living, but we're humble. We know who we are. It is a gift too. I feel that, but this gift that we have of being alcoholics, of being, the great thing about doing something like this is we can, there's a lot of people today with the drugs that kids take, and people, they do it once, they're dead, and I think when we look back and go, man, we used to do a lot of stuff, and why are we alive? So it's extra scary. It's extra scary for parents. It's extra scary for everyone. And you love your kids unconditionally. There are ways to help them, to support them, to not abandon them without destroying your life too. And I think that we both know ways to do that. But it's also extra important right now to think, if kids can go to a party and take one pill and they're dead, or so anybody can have that. So people used to be, I'm not judging what people do, and normal people can have a couple drinks. They do, and normal people, when they have too many drinks once, they go, oh, I feel terrible. I have a hangover. I'm not ever doing that again. That's normal people. People like you and I are like, I need more. That here's the problem. I don't have enough of that and we take risks. You know, you and I could be easily dead, but we take risks, and then we have to know that there's a lot of other people doing that same. They're risk taking, and you know, and it takes a lot to convince a young person you are worth it. Life is worth it. This is such a gift every day. You know, you say to yourself, well, maybe down the line you'll have a heart attack or you'll have some kind of cancer or something. Then you'll realize it. No, because we're addicts, we need to realize it every single day. And I feel like that too. I've had some health issues like you have, but every day is a gift. I'm so grateful for every day.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, as I've used my comedic career skills, um, and mesh them with my sobriety.
Yeah, you're very good at that. You're very funny. You are very, and let me just say something about you. There's a special needs kids school here, the Kate Center in Los Angeles, and you were kind enough to do our fundraiser roast for the great Stan Winston, and we raised $4 million. And these are, you know, these are kids that really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you. Those roasts were crazy, by the way. I just said, as you remember.
Well, you want to hear something funny from that evening? I was sitting at we didn't know each other yet, but they put me last because of my energy, and so they sat me down at the end of the day. I said, you had a lot of heavy hitters that night. You had Sarah Silverman, you had David Gee, there were a whole bunch of named guys there, and I was kind of like the guy on the end. And I'm sitting down there, and on my right is Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
So I'm on the dais, and roasts are hard because you write. I mean, Stan Winston. Everybody had the same Google search, and everyone had the same information on Stan. So I wrote a bunch of jokes for the roast, and now I'm sitting there with a legal pad watching the roast from the end. And the worst spot in a roast is last, because the jokes are disappearing as the evening progresses. Everything you thought of is gone. Oh, he was a dentist. Oh, he did this. Oh, he did that. So now I'm sitting there, and I put my head in my hands, and I gave up. Now I've already prayed. I've already done my meditation because I've never been on stage without first doing I wear my body armor, I call it. I do 6,000 gratitudes. So anyway, I'm sitting there, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, who I've never spoken to at this point, he taps me. He says, "What's wrong?" I said, "What's wrong?" I said, "They're doing all the jokes I wrote. All the jokes are disappearing. I can't do this. I'm going to bomb. This is going to be horrible." We're at the Beverly Hills Hotel. It's packed. Everyone's getting big laughs. And I am going to be the dud of the night. And so he says to me, "Nobody's made fun of me yet." He says, why don't you roast me? Forget about Stan. They all have the Stan jokes. He says, "I'll give you some material. Come on. You like cigars?" I said, "Sure." He says, "Come on, we sneak out. We'll go out in the courtyard." So we went out in the courtyard, and Arnold gave me a bunch of things that no one else knows, jokes. And I sat and I wrote a bunch of new things about Arnold, and I got up and I actually survived it by doing Arnold instead of Stan. And that was that night, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. And then he gave me his card with a phone number written on it, his personal phone number. And he said, "Here," he says, "you should call me. We should get together. I find you to be very refreshing, very entertaining. What a great guy." I said, "Okay," and I put it in my wallet. Well, Tom, maybe you can speak to this. There's a 2-week, if you don't call the person within 2 weeks, you're done. You can't call them. Because he won't remember who you are. He won't. So I kept the card. I never called him. Maybe that was my problem in Hollywood. I didn't have the guts. I wasn't a climber. I wasn't somebody that attached myself to people. I've always been sober since I was out there. I came out there with my recovery, and I've only been friends with people that I'm organically attached to. I've always felt like I never needed more. If it didn't come from God, then it wasn't for me. And so consequently, here I am in God's waiting. I'm in God's waiting room in Florida.
For one thing, you're the anchor of the roast, which means you're the best. That you're absolutely. We don't put guys that are not the best. Number two, Arnold loves comedy. He loves comedians. He considers himself a comedian. we roasted him. That I don't know if it's the next year when he was governor, and the jokes were just people were like, "Oh my God, why are you?" But he loves that. He's such a good guy. You know what? Jim Jeffries. Do you know Jim Jeffries, Australian
Yeah,
comedian?
great
He
guy.
got hired to do a private party at Brett Ratner's house, and Warren Beatty was there, and Al Pacino, all these people, and he did. He was nervous. Like, am I supposed to make fun of these guys? It could go bad. Anyway, he gets up at the table, and makes it gets it going, and it goes pretty well. And Warren Beatty comes up to him afterwards and said, "Here's my card. I want to work with you." So Jim Jeffries the next week called Warren Beatty's office, and his assistant answered, and she said, "Who is this?" "Jim Jeffries. We met at Brett Ratner's." Just a second. And when he could hear her say to Warren Beatty, "Jim Jeffries, you met him at Brett Ratner's house," and he could also hear him say, "I have no idea who that is." And then he hung up. That, for comedians, it's always better if the story is, if we're not the hero of every story. And but I get why you didn't want to call people. I get that.
But Tom, now I've been given a much purer approach with my comedy. Listen, my whole job on this planet, I understand is to make people joyful and make them happy and take no credit for it. Because had I been more successful on a national scale, had I been more well known around the world, who knows if I'd still be clean and sober. The point is, I've been given a task, I've been given a job, I've been given a mission. I stay on task, I stay on job, I stay on mission. I show up wherever I'm invited to go, whether it's $1 or $1,000. I do whatever I have to do to make people happy. I sign every letter I send to people, every email, looking forward to making you very happy. I don't know where I get all the happy from, but it must come from God, because being mixed, being picked on, having a lot of the same childhood traumas as you did, having been through a lot of the addiction problems that you've had, same story, basically, different month, different year, different state. At the end of the day, to have this much happy must mean that it's a gift from someplace gigantic.
Well, also, your Arnold story is perfect. Who knows what would happen if you called and the story of you and Arnold having those moments together and him helping you, that's the home run, yeah, I would be. I mean, I talk to him all the time, but that's only because, but I'd be nervous. Like I'm weird about calling him down. Like, geez, I don't want to call. Then all of a sudden he'll FaceTime me at 11 at night. There's his face. I don't want to bug people. The thing about you is you're so talented. That's the number one thing. Am I good at what I do? Am I talented? Yeah, I'll take that over any kind of success. Number one, I'm good, because we know people that aren't. And I'll tell you, man, careers go in different ways. Sometimes you're get discovered, you're 20, and sometimes you're 50, sometimes you're 60, but you go back and go, I'm respected. I love what I do. I'm very good at it. That's what I think about you. You're very good at it. You also share your sobriety. This is where exactly we all want to be. We all want more, but you're so talented, you can't. You wouldn't trade the talent you have for more success. You just wouldn't do it. You wouldn't be the same guy. You wouldn't be able to help other people. You wouldn't be able to share honestly, to be honest. So that's what we're here. We're on this tiny planet, in this big universe. And sometimes we think, oh, I am the most important thing, but we're not. This is, we're important to other people. We're important to loving people, being loved, being of service, changing the world little by little by little, put good ripples out there, because we used to put bad ripples out there. And that's how we were living our life. And now we've turned it around.
Well, I'm just glad to be part of the natural order of the universe. And ever since like the zebras stay with the zebras and the whales stay with the whales, and like the alcoholics and the drug addicts and apparently tonight the Jews, we say, I mean, you and I would never walk up to each other on the street and say, "Hello, Jew, how are you?" But because of, it's funny. Our Judaism is nowhere near as important to us as our sobriety, because without our sobriety, none of these other wonderful things are even possible.
It has to be number one. And people are like, well, you have kids. It's like if you're on an airplane and there's a problem and the airplane dives and the mask drops down, you're supposed to put it on yourself before you put it on your kid. And that's how I look at it. Like, this is the number one thing I have to do. The thing about Judaism, once you have kids, you start going, okay, we're going to do this. Like, you get real sanctimonious
Right.
in doing it. It's like, I don't need to. And then you see your little kids like, oh, no, we need to do all this stuff. And
Yes.
it'll be good for them. And maintaining an addiction, I forget what you said you spent a day, is hard. It takes all your brain power.
Oh, yeah.
But, the thing is, if we can do that, if we can find drugs on a desert island, which we can, then anything else in our life, it's all gravy.
Where we learned to do that was in a room full of people that weren't there they weren't there to be entertained. They were there to hear about my gut level, my real story, my who are you? Who are you, and why should we sit here for 45 minutes and listen to you? And that's where I learned how to. I learned. That's where I learned not to lie. I learned not to hide. I didn't have to hide. I didn't have to lie. I didn't have to make anything up. All I had to do was show up, and the unconditional love that was there for me brought out a different side of my ability to convey humor through my actual story.
And when you sit in a group like that and you tell the worst thing you did and somebody's nodding, nobody's judging it. Everybody's like, oh yeah, I get that. That's a great feeling to go, this is my place. This is my safe place where I can really share all of my, character defects, my things I've done. And then you don't carry that shame if because we love carrying shame. Anyway.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Tom, for this time that we got to spend together. I can feel us tailing off, so we should probably just say good night and God bless. And I look forward to seeing you in person in the near future. And I'll be thinking about you, and everything that you're doing and going through currently, the things that you have going on in your life. I pray, I'll remember you in my thoughts ongoing. Until we get to meet each other in person and go, hey, I remember we did that together. That was fun. Thank you.
I'll never forget this. And my problems are high class problems compared to the problems I used to have. So thank you for thinking. This made me feel a lot better. I hope other people get a little bit of inspiration after they see us two maniacs and what we've done with our life. And so that's why we're here. We're here on this planet to help other people.
Well, thank you to Amudim for bringing us together. United, we heal. We unite to heal. And Tom and I have had a wonderful time. So thank you so much. And thank you, Tom.
Thank you for supporting this wonderful organization. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And give more.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.